The Home Secretary has signed a new plan with France to curb illegal migration across the Channel. Très magnifique. With surveillance drones, it's pièce de résistance. But James Cleverly's tête-à-tête with the chair of the Home Affairs Committee, Diana Johnson, about the asylum backlog earlier on, wasn't un grand success. Get a load of this.
So that's the total number now of who is in the backlog, but we've recognised from...
You keep describing it as backlog.
But it's not a backlog. I'm sorry, I don't understand why it's not a backlog.
It's the case. I mean...
Why is it not a backlog? Because you haven't dealt with them and people are waiting. Why is that not a backlog?
Well, it's a queue.
It's a queue.
No, the point is, you can apply... I think your use of the word backlog implies something that I disagree with.
Your use of the word backlog implies something that I disagree with. Really? Well, there's many words that you could use. It's a bloody long queue, by the way. 170,000 people supposedly in it. Let's get my panel's take on this. Deputy Police Editor of The Sun, Ryan Sabey, author and broadcaster Lucy Beresford, and columnist at Spiked Online, Ella Whelan. Very good evening to all of you. You're not in a queue. It's not a backlog. You know, they've now decided just to reinvent the English language to try and get out of it, right?
A fantastic form of words by James Cleverly. And James Cleverly is normally pretty sharp in these situations.
Yes.
I think he even managed... I don't think he'd give himself 10 out of 10 on this one. But the trouble is, there is a backlog.
Yeah.
You know, they may call it a queue or there's certainly thousands of people.
This is modern politics, isn't it? You know, call it something else and you pretend it isn't what it actually is.
Exactly. And he'd probably been better off if he'd gone in there and said, look, we are trying to deal with it. This is the situation. We've got it down from, for argument's sake, 100,000. There's now 4,000 this backlog queue.
Right.
That's the situation. And people would applaud him.
Well, I think people would understand if he just admitted what it is that they've done here, which is not very much. And Rishi Sunak appears to have granted asylum to a load of people who were in the backlog, so they're not in it anymore. But, you know, to pretend that there isn't a backlog when everybody knows that the law was passed last year which made it illegal to come here and seek asylum. So all the people that have come here since that law was passed technically can't have asylum. So what are they doing?
Well, this is the trouble, and this is why Rishi Sunak wants those flights to get away as soon as possible. But it seems that as soon as he does get that legislation through, there is still going to be individual claims lodged through the court system, and it will take months and months.
But it won't be a backlog, though.
No, I'm trying to think of the right word. No queue, no backlog. I'm not quite sure what it'll be.
Waiting.
I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? I mean, why can't they just admit that they made a complete and utter dog's breakfast of it, and they're trying to fix it, but it's really difficult, and they're not really expected to get anybody sent to Rwanda at all.
Well,
just tell the truth.
You say tomato, I say tomato. It's all semantics. And unfortunately, it's all smoke and mirrors because there's a very strong possibility that none of those planes will ever take off the ground before a general election. That's the key, which, as many people are debating, is it going to be in May? Is it going to be in November? The strong money is on it being in November to give this Rwanda policy a chance to get off the ground, pardon the pun, but it probably won't.
No, it won't. I mean, I was talking to one of the Lords from the Conservative Party last night, Ella, and he was saying, you know, this is likely to go on, this ping-pong between the House of Lords and the House of Commons with the bill itself is going to go on for ages. So it'll probably be beyond Easter before that sees any possibility of becoming a proper law. And, I mean, it's just ridiculous now, isn't it?
Well, I mean, this whole policy, the plan for the Rwanda scheme, has been a bit like that sort of exchange around queue, waiting line, backlog. It's sort of... Well, it's a load of BS. I mean, it's just it's trying to put lipstick on a pig, because even if you did have the Rwanda bill sail through with no amendments, no Lords kind of messing it up and sending it back and all the rest of it, even if it was totally intact and perfect, number one, the numbers on the planes aren't sufficient.
No.
So it's that it won't deal with the backlog or the queue anyway. And number two, the intricacies of the Rwanda plan, which is basically trying to pretend like there's a workaround for international courts and doing some things that are really quite dodgy, like basically saying to civil service, shut up and, you know, just don't worry that you might actually be getting into trouble. We've got your back, as if anyone would believe a minister saying that. Means that it wouldn't work even if it was perfect. So it's just there's so much sort of disingenuous rhetoric around this. And actually, the news about cooperation with France is a good thing. I mean, I think that's what people are... We know that the solution to this is much more sort of mundane and sensible and almost technical and making sure that there are sort of systems in place and cooperations in place. The sort of like flinging people on a barge or a boat, another kind of semantics row, what did you call that Bibi Stockholm thing, was never going to work. The planes was never going to work. It's all just about the sort of boring sort of work of dealing with France, dealing with the sort of technicalities of stopping boats in that way. But again,
I mean, this has been going on for years. You know, we've given France hundreds of millions of pounds, haven't we, to supposedly help stop people leaving. They haven't done it.
No, we've given them best part of £500 million.
Yeah, and what have we got in return?
Not a great deal. Maybe a little bit more cooperation. We've got our border force or our police into their control rooms. But it feels like we need our police actually patrolling the beaches and actually making sure they're going up and down the coastline to make sure that no one actually gets in there.
But we now have drones.
Yes.
The drones
They've suddenly discovered
us.
drones, haven't they? They've suddenly gone, oh, I know, we can get some drones. Well, you know, it's 2024. Most people have got drones and had drones for quite some time. But it seems to me that, you know, again, they've just walked into a room and suddenly discovered that, you know, oh, Christ, it's a bad situation, this. How are we going to get out of it?
But the problem is the people smugglers have drones as well, because they're actually trying to work out where the police are. If they are patrolling on the beaches, they want to know that in advance. So the people smugglers, are ahead of the curve.
Of course they are.
They're very smart. And to break that model almost requires infiltration. You do wonder why we haven't actually broken that system, why we don't actually know who the people are.
Yeah. I mean, every now and again you see a case, don't you, of people being prosecuted, and occasionally, you know, maybe half a dozen people a year get prosecuted and sent to prison. But it's just like you're dealing with the mafia here. You're dealing with, you know, very, very serious criminals who have got an incredible network which gets everything from money to drugs to guns to dinghies smuggled all over the world. You know, these people are smuggling people into America, never mind smuggling them into Britain. So
Labour talk about trying to tackle the gangs further upstream, which then means you've then got to put a lot of resources and UK resources, UK police going into mainland Europe, and that's going to be really, really difficult to smash. And they are always one step ahead.
I mean, it seems to me, and I know there will be human rights lawyers who will shout me down. It seems to me the only way that you stop people coming here is to make it something that they shouldn't want to do. So that if they do arrive here, you put them into some kind of detention. I'm not suggesting, you know, some horrific kind of Devil's Island style thing. But if they knew they were going to just get locked up and they wouldn't get out, they'd stop coming, wouldn't they?
Well, we did have detention centres in places like Yarlswood, which, I mean, the problem with Yarlswood was that people were there for inordinate amounts of time. I mean, with indefinable sentences, basically, and living in utter squalor. So it was badly run and it was a bad system. But in the abstract, not a hotel. There's all rows about whether or not it's cheaper to be in the Bibi Stockholm than to be in a hotel.
Or in other words, just as expensive. It's not cheap, whatever it is.
The difference is about 20 quid or something like that. And but if you just simply had a detention centre that was ready for people had their cases open and shut as quickly as possible, that it was humane, that it was sort of a normal system that ran normally. Then the deterrent would be that the system works and you don't get to play it.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this kind of draconian, outlandish, almost kind of ghost system that is the Rwanda plan. Yeah, right. It could just be a sort of a bureaucracy that works properly.
Haven't they? They've invented this overcomplicated sort of scenario, which they say will be the solution, but everybody really knows it won't be.
And also, it doesn't actually address one of the primary concerns that the electorate have, which is about legal migration, the actual figures for that. And admittedly, most voters would tell you that actually what they're really concerned about is the cost of living.